I saw Wall Street Journal's article recently came out with values. I'm sure you saw that as well.
Yeah,
the collapse of the American values.
Patriotism, community involvement, having children, and going to church have just descended in meaning.
But money is up.
Money is up.
Yeah.
And that's that hyper-individualism.
That's what you were talking about.
Again, I am a capitalist. I think that markets work, but they must be in harmony with other duties that make the money meaningful. Otherwise, it's just nothing more than pleasure or things that will erode in dust. So it must point towards something. You must aim high. That was the Western ideal, right? And that's why the Declaration is such a beautiful document. It mentions God 4 times. And in fact, in the end of the Declaration, it's basically a prayer. We don't teach this to our kids. It's an appeal. It says, we appeal to the supreme judge of the world. And they're pointing high to something larger than themselves. It's very Platonic, to use a phrase that was earlier, that there's things that we can't quite feel, that cannot be looked at in a cannot be looked at in a microscope, but we know they're real. We know love, we know justice, we know mercy, we know kindness, we know compassion is real. And in fact, we need to build a society around that. What the postmodernists and the post-structuralists have done post-1960s is they basically say if it's not material, if you can't see it in cause and effect, it's not real. And that's a tragedy to believe. And so yes, the byproduct of that is, so you have two things happening at once. America pulls back from its values that once defined it.
Can you go to the chart?
It's
if you go a little lower?
It's very powerful. But then they kind of buried the lead. In fact, they didn't incorporate it, which I just want to reiterate. It is a fact that we are the most depressed, most suicidal, most anxious, most medicated, most alcohol addicted in history. Now you might say, well, Charlie, that's causation and correlation. Hard to say that they aren't connected. Hard to say that if patriotism, religion, community involvement, having kids collapses, and all the negative indicators skyrocket, that there isn't some sort of relationship there.
Tom, what do you think needs to happen for a man to get on his knees and say, I need God? What do you think needs to happen for that to take place to a nation?
Great crisis builds great response in the heart of any man.
Yeah.
After 9/11, you saw the unification of America in an amazing way. Because whenever you have a great crisis, you will inherently point back to a great tenet or a great truth. And what happened on 9/11, the great truth was, nobody messes with the greatest country in the world, and I'm part of that, and I'm proud to be part of that, and I'm coming together with my neighbors, and I'm upset about this, and I'm healing together, and I'm mourning together, and I'm angry together. Together, the word together keeps coming. In the age of moral relativism, as we see here, everybody's truth is okay. So starting in 1968, 69, if you were to study that, there were about 4 things that came together that make it very understandable for a crack in the heart of the populace, in the population. One is, you have the death of Bobby Kennedy, the death of Martin Luther King. You've got the Summer of Love. You've got the senseless, these people that believe the senseless sending to war of our young men. If you didn't get into college, you're going to war. Tough, If you manage to get into college, so if your family could get you into college, you don't have to go to war. Well, talk to Al Gore and W about that. They both took advantage of that privilege to stay out of the war. And there was this crack that happened there. You had the loss of these leaders. You had also the loss of faith in the elders of the time, because what was happening there, and the great Summer of Love, where everybody thought, well, then all your truths will be okay. That was well intended, but what happened in the middle of that is, if everybody's truth is okay, PBD, then there's no one ruler for standard for morals. There's no one ruler for standards of what is patriotism, what is faith in America, or what is good, or what do we do for our community. And suddenly everybody's truth is okay, and you can't judge me. Becomes the boomerang that comes back. The unintended consequences is you lose control of the whole thing. And so I think great crisis is needed, what will bring America back together. And unfortunately, great crises are usually very painful in their own right.
Can I say?
Of course.
That was really beautifully put. I didn't even think about the college enrollment draft thing prior. The issue, though, Patrick, is that if you have moral chaos, tyranny comes next. And there's a totalitarian impulse that is running through our country. We call it identity politics, political correctness. Is that the answer to this will not be more freedom or more liberty in the short term. It's that we're going to need instruments of meaning. So then we're going to need somebody to tell you what to do, which is one of the reasons why I think this COVIDian fascism was accepted by so many Americans for so long. And so you get strong leaders, quote unquote strong leaders, if the moral fiber of your country decays.
If I can just add to that, I believe everything you're saying is accurate. I also think that there's sort of a messaging problem, because you talked about the Joel Osteens of the world, or even the Mark Wahlbergs of the world. Who do you think is more likely to convert the everyday person to love America and to fear God again? A Joel Osteen or a Mark Wahlberg type? I would argue that you need this in the pop culture zeitgeist.
Yeah.
It's not going to take a religious leader or some sort of apostle that's going to convert everyday Americans to start loving Americans again or go to church more often. It's not going to be a religious leader. You see, the fastest growing religion in America these days is atheism and agnosticism, right?
Yeah.
And non-denominational, or just non-believer.
Yes.
So we need to, kind of like what you're saying, we need to make loving America again and American values and Judeo-Christian values pop culture and cool again. And until that's done, I think we're going to have this same conversation for years and years to
so
come.
my argument is that the American founding is the great rallying point. I think that it's so beautiful, it's so exceptional, it's so rare in human history, and it also, I think people yearn to actually love the place they live in. I know that's an unusual thing to say. I think people actually want an excuse to love America. And so I think the promise of the founding can be that great unifying. That you could disagree on tax policy, disagree on immigration, but let's at least agree that these founders were onto something very big, bold, and beautiful. And we're recipients from. And then understand what that is. We got a real conversation about that.
If I can give you one thing for that, if that's the answer,
which it may or might not be.
Okay, which it is. So you remember the movie The Patriot?
Yeah, with Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson,
who, by the way, is a Christian. That we put him on the list. He's good.
I mean, talk about
We saw
a
what
movie,
happened to him after Passion of the Christ.
yeah. Well, he's doing number 2 now.
Yeah, but that movie, I don't know if that preceded Passion of the Christ.
It was
might
probably
have
before.
And
yeah.
Braveheart. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
But that guy made loving America
Amen.
and fighting for America cool and in the pop culture. So it's going to take something like that, kind of what I was saying, in the pop culture, to make young Americans. Gen Z, 16% is not proud to be American. You're not going to get them to start loving America by saying, hey, read the Declaration of Independence, buddy.
I acknowledge that.
Yeah.
I'm not even, trust me, try to get them to read the preamble to the Constitution, let alone the first paragraph of one of the course human events becomes necessary one people to dissolve the political bands that have time to another. To get them to even read that, like, what does that even mean? I'm talking about the eternal, compelling truth behind it, right? That maybe, and if not, then we're a lot farther gone than I would like to believe. But I totally agree. I mean, Tom Cruise's Top Gun Maverick, praise God that was the #1 movie in the last year and a half.
Yeah.
I think that is evidence in my favor that people enjoyed kind of the pro-Americana vibe, right? The kind of, we're going to go up against the bad guys. Now,
there was no bad guy. Name the bad guy.
No, that's what was
so
interesting.
It was no country. They didn't identify it.
Almost,
but it was just about America.
Intentionally abstract, almost, right? And it was about rallying behind a team. And it really didn't pander that much to identity politics. I mean, it was a little bit throughout, but it was largely a movie that could have been made in the 80s or 90s, which is why it was so successful.
You know what I think needs to happen. This is my ideas, on this. First of all, for me, the enemy. If you study enemy, how it did whatever it did, it always divided. If a person, today we're having a meeting upstairs, we're having a manager's meeting, and I said, the biggest challenge in a marriage, who's the biggest enemy in a marriage? The biggest enemy is when the spouse becomes the marriage. It's always better to have an external enemy than an internal enemy. The worst type of enemy is the internal enemy. We have internal enemies right now, and the way they're doing it is they're so brilliant, dark but brilliant. They're going straight to the top of influence, and they're crippling them. Straight to the top. But did you see what he did? But did you see what she did? But your parents, they don't know what they're doing. Your parents don't care about you. If your parents came out, they would probably judge you. You know what? This is how we are. We are a little bit more this way. So they're dividing to the point of influence, whatever the influence is. Now, Mel Gibson may be a guy who I can watch all day. His movies, I think he's fantastic. I think it's funny. He can do funny. I think he can do, drama. He can do anything. Put him anywhere, he's going to do great, right? Yeah. But I think you need to get somebody like the face of the NBA, the face of the NFL, the face of Hollywood. Like, it needs to be a Rock type. It needs to be a Michael type, a LeBron type, a Brady type, a person like that that's willing to talk. So if they're going to work that way to come and take the influence from the top, you got to go get some of the guys at the top.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.